GoDaddy is our sponsor for our coverage from OpenStack in Barcelona. Our theme for the conference, diversity and inclusion in the OpenStack ecosystem. Learn more about GoDaddy's diversity efforts at godaddy.com.
How are you, Alex?
Very well. So, and you're with Cisco, but you're on the Technical Oversight Committee
Right.
for OpenStack. Tell us about what that job is.
Right, so actually I've been on the OpenStack Technical Committee for about 4 years now, so that's 4 elections in a row.
Wow.
And honestly, this last election, I just felt like I was learning enough new things at Cisco that it was time to try to focus on technical areas that had to do with OpenStack, but not necessarily governance. So it was a hard decision, but I chose not to run this time, and I really feel like I should have tried to maybe train somebody up in that 6 months, or just let somebody else know, hey, there's going to be an opening, I'd love you to learn more about what this looks like. So, to be perfectly honest, I think I walked into the joint board technical committee meeting yesterday and some people still didn't know I hadn't run. So it's not exactly new news, but it is sort of a change I've chosen to do this exact term.
So are you on the Technical Oversight Committee?
Not anymore, as of couple weeks ago.
As a couple weeks ago, it's still on the site as you're on it.
Right, and I mean, things get updated late, right? Yeah. No, and I think the point, is that we need to try to grow other leaders. Like, I think as I learn more about technical leadership, is half of the job really should be, how do you grow someone else into that role? And honestly, I feel like some of the men are better at it than me, and I don't know if that's practice or what, but I really want to look for a way to grow more diversity on the technical committee and find ways to do that.
Yeah, so trying to find ways to do that, because we've had conversations with people who are in, for instance, the Node.js community, women in the Node.js community who also are, there's also members of the trans community who are in Node.js, and one of the problems that they talked about is like how do you like break that barrier, right? Because if the men are all maintainers, right, and then the women have to be the innovators, or But then if the women, the women or the people in the trans community do innovate, and maybe their contributions aren't heard necessarily, right, then how do you kind of break that? Right. I mean, I have struggled with this even for the last couple of years. Like, my personal story is on, I was on a panel of technical committee members in Hong Kong, and at the end of the session, it was basically a meet the technical committee kind of session. And at the end of the session, someone who stood up in the audience and said, here we are in Asia, yet I look at this panel up here and I don't see any Asian people up here. And it was also a summit where we realized many of our contributors were Asian. Yeah. And so I sat there and I kind of felt like everyone was sort of looking at me like, you're the one who's a little different. Would you like to answer that? And honestly, in that moment I froze. I didn't have an answer. I didn't have the exact words for then. But the great thing is that another technical committee member could answer it, had ideas, and it's part of that mentoring, growing leadership. But also he approached me later and said, Anne, do you have thoughts on this? Would you like to have a deeper discussion about this? And so I think that's what's important, and especially the more OpenStack Summits I'm at and the more I'm in the community, is that we need that male ally, that they're growing any type of diverse contributor through the ranks, right? And I also was able to blog about it later, and that post actually reached a lot more people. So in some ways it was my own personal style, like in the moment I didn't have the answer, but I could later blog about it, think about it, and that had more reaching effect and ended up being a post that I could do on opensource.com, on the OpenStack blog, just to spread the word, like, yes, we're thinking about these things, yes, people are individually talking about it so that we can have honest, deep conversations about it. So how do you approach that from like a worldwide perspective, like you're saying? I mean, we were just talking with Sriram Subramanian earlier, and he was saying how he tried to, they had an OpenStack day in Seattle, and and he offered a scholarship, and there were people who applied from different parts of the world, and they were like he said you need to self-identify yourself. We're not going to set criteria or anything like that.
Right.
Is that an approach? I mean, because it seems to me that there's the external efforts you can make to increase diversity, but there's also the internal efforts. So maybe adjusting how the projects are managed, for example.
Could be.
Yeah. Are there aspects of the projects that you think could be managed a little bit differently to help kind of bring more people into the decision-making roles?
I think that over the years I've seen some projects be more successful at this, and it's a combination of the ability to grow others up. But what I mean by that is I've seen especially the projects that participate in the Outreachy program, which is an OpenStack, an open source internship for women. And the way it started was someone noticed that Google Summer of Code had way more male applicants than female. Plus, she was asked to mentor someone individually through this, I think it was even the Linux kernel, right? So in a way, it's about that one-to-one mentoring. And so the projects that have worked in the Outreachy program and one-to-one mentor are very successful at this. I also think that I look at the success of PyLadies, where they specifically say very clearly, this is for women. You may bring a friend, but it's specifically for women. And so I think that some of the outreach needs to be specific to the groups you're trying to reach. But some of the outreach really is about that core ally group where they're constantly looking to bring new people on, looking to teach people to get them to the next level.
So how do you translate that into the actual patches, right? And and what patches get the attention and what don't?
Oh, sure. Well, and I mean, in the case of OpenStack Cinder, right? It's the block storage project. They could find, if you can carve out a project that an intern can do in 3 months, then the patch sets you can also coach them through the patch sets that can get merged. And so I've seen that pattern work well. It's very difficult to teach and very hard to learn. You have to really commit yourself to it, to the patch size, to the socialization of the patch, to knowing when you're being annoying and when you're not, right? But all of it is teachable. And I mean, so I'm super interested in treating docs like code. I've always had that idea of if we can automate, if we can act like we're a developer contributor anyway, then we're going to learn alongside. And so what I've seen is that I've had even a technical editor who's said to me, and I mean you're in journalism sort of, you know how this works, right? You have an editor who's like, but I'm really good at editing, and I'm like, but if I ever need another editor, how do you teach an editor? And so that's the kind of thing you're trying to teach. You're trying to teach size of patches, the comparison of the patches not overtaxing the person who has to do the review. And it's not easy to get right away, and you have to do it. I've talked to writer after writer, and they're like, Anne, until I actually experienced the OpenStack way, I had no idea it would work, and I had no idea how it worked, but I just faithfully wrote down on a Post-it note the things to do every time, and eventually you get the memory muscle and you remember.
Right, how to do it.
Right.
Right. And so that's part of it. The other part is that one of the things we heard today is about OpenStack and how it's organized according to project.
Yep.
And the projects can be, you have the cores in each project, right?
Yep.
And and then so each project kind of is run individually.
Yeah.
And so each one almost has its own kind of management
little
structure,
culture,
right.
Yeah.
Is there adaptation that that is, I hate to say the word needed, but is there that adaptation that should be considered?
So the technical committee met in Ann Arbor this summer and took specific leadership training that was very much about that cross-coordination. And we walked away from it, we walked into it going, are you going to teach us to make sandwiches? It was a very bizarre training, but it was basically about how do you, as a servant leader, which means not that people are working on projects in order to meet my needs, but that I, as a leader in the community, will help people get to the place they want to be. then how do we flip that for the TC to enable more and more projects, right? And because that's part of our struggle is the growth of all these projects with their own individual quirks and personalities, right? And so, one of the things we're doing, and Doug Hellman and I just did a Super User TV interview this morning about it, is we're trying to find ways to gain a way to write down expectations across projects. And so the way we're kind of putting this out, and this is a first draft, believe me, we're trying, is to say, these are goals for this release. What do you think all the projects should have done by this certain time? And so an example that we sort of drew from was when we needed to recreate API reference documentation because it was getting too difficult to maintain across multiple projects. Like literally when I started in OpenStack, there were 2 APIs to document. There are now 30, right? Yeah. And there has to be over 900 calls. Like, the scale is big. So what we're doing is writing down, these are the expectations for all the projects. We would like you to have all of your Oslo incubated code out. And we have people at the ready on the Oslo team to review those patches, help them get to the goal. Now, it is also very hard to get to an agreement on a good goal for all the projects. And since the projects are differently sized, differently resourced, how do we make sure we don't leave any project behind by telling them to do the impossible? Right. So that's part of the servant leadership, finding ways to give them what they need.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Servant leadership.
Yeah.
Does that help in thinking about the organization horizontally? I mean, we have the Project Oslo, right?
Right.
And I know there's some other efforts to try to bring more, more continuity to the different projects themselves.
Right, standardization, consistency.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I walk up to any project today and I can clone the repo, type in tox -e docs, and build any project's docs. So we have made great strides. It's just that now we have to look at that next layer of what should we be doing next and write down as an expectation. So, and I'm not sure if I exactly answered your question, but that's at the heart of it is just, write it down, say this is what we want. That's how we'll get consistency.
That's, you're someone preaching to the choir here.
Because we love to write.
Write it down.
That's right.
So what's next for you?
Well, I'm actually trying to learn more about technical product management and developer advocacy. So what I want to be able to do is understand, now that I have more experience in open source, how do you make it into a product that users will love? And I think that we have a lot of work to do on that developer layer, because there's a lot of, sandpaper. We need to sand down some edges.
Yeah.
A lot of sandpaper opportunities in that. And I honestly learned a lot about automating infrastructure recently. I'm doing a talk tomorrow at 5:05 with my coworker Hart Hoover, where I literally explained that I barely knew enough to do this task, but I decided I wanted to automate a docs task based on Ruby with Jekyll and build a website with Nginx that I could do a git push to.
Nice.
Right? So that is what's next for me is I have to keep learning.
What are you using as your editor for that?
Yeah. Oh, honestly, just like VI. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not VI Emacs.
Yeah, nice.
Because I also use Text Strangler on my Mac. But yeah, and it's also right in my sort of core vision for documentation is that we should all be able to collaborate on it. We should all be able to build it.
So is the Jekyll instance connects then to a GitHub repo?
Well, what's amazing is I'm actually deploying Ruby and Jekyll, the particular versions I need for a particular theme I want to use, to the cloud server. Then locally on my development environment, I'm typing git remote add cloud server. So then anytime I do a git push cloud server, the cloud server is serving my content.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So have you thought about containers for that kind of
you know what's fascinating, and I think I have a slide about this, is I struggled with like Ruby, and I don't know if people know about Ruby version manager, and like you get into that dev environment and sometimes it's just a day where you're like, all I did was chase a version. Then I found this post where I could literally just type Docker run and use an image that somebody else had built with all the versions.
Right.
And I'm like, oh man, I found the easy way,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
There's a lot of talk about containerizing, like platforms like the new stack, where we could essentially do that, right? Have different containers for different things and stuff like that.
And
But that makes sense for what you're talking about.
well, I mean, my problem is I don't know enough about container networking to say if I could do this in a highly available way or securely.
Yeah, that's where you need a service almost
don't
to do
know.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where we need more education and training. I saw a great animation describing Kubernetes container networking, and I was like, oh, that's why it's hard, because it took like 10 slides to describe where the pipes are going.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what's still, containers are easy for dev environments. Containers are hard for production.
They are very hard.
Right.
Well, listen, Ann, this has been a terrific conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time, and good luck in your developer advocacy efforts and everything else.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks.
GoDaddy is our sponsor for our coverage from OpenStack in Barcelona. Our theme for the conference: diversity and inclusion in the OpenStack ecosystem. Learn more about GoDaddy's diversity efforts at godaddy.com.